Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we got a couple of quick hitters. But before we start the podcast, again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. I tell you guys this every single episode because we are on the rise to 1,000 subscribers. We are on the road to being one of the best Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform, man. So shout out to everybody that's already subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you doing, man? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also hit that post notification bell so you always are notified for our daily episode drops. With that being said, let's go ahead and start today's episode so I can remind you guys why you should subscribe. Starting with the Magic's NBA Cup schedule being released, and guess what? The games are pretty solid. First up, Friday, November 7th against the Boston Celtics. Friday, November 14th against the Brooklyn Nets. Tuesday, November 25th at the Philadelphia 76ers on NBC, and Friday, November 28th against the Detroit Pistons. All right, so if I had to pick my quote-unquote record prediction for this four-game slate in the NBA Cup, I say the worst-case scenario, we go 2-2. I think the game against Brooklyn is the gimme. I think that we can win one, if not both, of the games against Boston and Philadelphia. One of those games is definitely getting won, and I think the game against Brooklyn is a gimme. The game against Detroit will probably be one of the more interesting games. We'll talk about them in a little bit. I think the best case scenario is this team goes 3-1 or a cool 4-0 sweep. There's real opportunity here, particularly I think that game on NBC against the Philadelphia 76ers is going to be huge. Whether or not Joel Embiid and Paul George will be healthy for that game, it's very early in the season, the NBA Cup is, and obviously the Philadelphia 76ers are already coming into the season with bad news relating to the injury concerns around Embiid and George, so we'll see if they even are active for that game. But on NBC, it'll be a really good game for them to be able to show out and shine in a real way, talking about Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and the guys, to be able to really play at a high level on a big stage against a team that, when healthy, is probably going to be considered as a top 5 playoff squad. But in the national media right now is still in a bit of a proven mode themselves. I think that the biggest team that's going to be of any real threat to us is going to be the Detroit Pistons, and I think that's a good way to transition into one of the more interesting topics on the internet right now about the Orlando Magic, and that's this. Is there a brewing rivalry starting up with the Detroit Pistons? Obviously, two really young squads on the up and up, have really solid teams across the board built around star forwards, talking about Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero for the Orlando Magic. And for the Detroit Pistons, we know the go-to guy is Cade Cunningham, a guy who was dang near All-NBA last season, right, and was an All-Star. I think that when you look at what's going on with this team in the Orlando Magic, and you look at how the Detroit Pistons have quickly risen in just the last 2 years, have been able to go from one of the worst teams in the NBA to being one of the more highly regarded teams in the Eastern Conference in just one season turnaround. This is going to be an interesting dynamic between these two teams because the Orlando Magic are a team that's flamed out in the first round the last 2 seasons, but is a team that has really, really high expectations going into this year, with the Eastern Conference top teams being kind of a little bit down this time around. I think also, obviously, a little bit of this rivalry brewing, so to speak, is because the Orlando Magic are set to play the Detroit Pistons more than they play any other team this upcoming season. I believe the Magic play the Pistons like 7 times or somewhere around there during this upcoming regular season. So, with that being said, we're gonna see a lot of the Detroit Pistons, and in my personal opinion, this is a way too early prediction of mine. I believe that this is going to be an interesting litmus test between these two teams, because I believe that the Detroit Pistons are going to be the Orlando Magic's first round matchup in the Eastern Conference playoffs. I'm calling it right now. I believe that the Orlando Magic are going to finish as either the 3 or the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference playoff structure, and I believe that the Detroit Pistons are either going to be 5 or 6. And I think that in that 4-5 matchup or that 3-6 matchup, that the Detroit Pistons will be facing off against our Orlando Magic, and that makes this rivalry that's brewing with how many games are played between these two in the regular season that much more valuable and that much more special. You heard it first. That is my way too. That is one of what will be a handful of way too early predictions before the NBA season starts. This is one that really stands out to me. That I believe that the Detroit Pistons versus Orlando Magic matchup is going to be a lot more important in the regular season than a lot of people want to give it credit. Yes, the NBA Cup is one of those things that maybe certain teams value, other teams don't. I think the Orlando Magic should want to clean sweep the NBA Cup, and I think that if you look back to teams like the Indiana Pacers from 2 seasons ago, who ran the table and made it all the way to the NBA Cup final. They obviously ended up losing, but that was a team that had really, really low expectations, or relatively low expectations during the regular season. Made it deep into the NBA Cup with Tyrese Halliburton looking like a top 5 MVP candidate at the time, and that team went on to later on make it to the Eastern Conference Finals that year. Right? I think that a similar pathway could be set for a team like the Orlando Magic to have a top 5 MVP caliber candidate in Paulo Banchero, run the table through the NBA Cup, either get to the NBA Cup final or win the whole dang thing, and then be this team that now everybody has to really watch out for, and a team that could make some real noise in the postseason and even push themselves to an Eastern Conference Finals appearance like that team did, right? So I think the NBA Cup is a real good litmus test, not just for, potential matchups like this one against the Pistons, as I mentioned before, where it adds another potential matchup against a team you might see a lot during the regular season as is, but it also is a good chance to boost team morale for some of these younger teams that are looking to prove themselves to the rest of the league, a la a team like the Magic, who are still trying to earn their respect in front of the national media in terms of things like earning more nationally televised games and things of that nature. But again, going to repeat it one more time. You guys heard it here first. My first way too early prediction for the Orlando Magic, outside of, Paulo Banchero being a top 5 MVP candidate, if I haven't already said that on the pod, is that I believe the Pistons will be the team the Magic see in the first round. So anytime we play the Pistons, lock in real close, because it could be an important matchup. Next, let's talk about a former Orlando Magic point guard, Corey Joseph, who, of course, we had to let go for cap flexibility purposes. And now, according to Bleacher Report, is the 10th best free agent remaining. Thought this was really interesting because you have to think about the fact that in that grouping, there are still guys like Russell Westbrook, Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, Cam Thomas, just to name a few, that are still high-level contributors. And Corey Joseph was ranked 10th. Now, 10th as the best remaining free agent when we are at the midway point of August. It's not great. It's not great, right? Obviously. But I would also say, on the other side of that, this is a guy that could be a high-level contributor for a solid team. Could he be a backup point guard for the Dallas Mavericks, a team that could still use some real point guard depth with Kyrie Irving likely to miss the entire season, or at least 85% of the season? Yes, I think he could be a solid backup behind D'Angelo Russell in that squad. Could he be a solid backup point guard in Los Angeles, where they were targeting guys like Chris Paul once upon a time? They were targeting guys like Bradley Beal once upon a time. Is Corey Joseph those guys? Not necessarily, but can he be serviceable as a backup point guard? I think he could be, right? So there's a handful of different teams I think he could be really interesting on. And Corey Joseph, we hope that you are able to land on an NBA roster and be a contributing backup somewhere where you have a chance to at least, play winning basketball, because if you were still on this team, and maybe you could be brought back on a veteran minimum, we don't necessarily have the money for it right now. We'd have to make some cap moves again, possibly having to move off of two-way guys or something of that nature in order to make the space work. But Corey Joseph is a solid backup point guard who can shoot the three at a high level, isn't necessarily the best defender, but does compete on that side of the ball, and a guy who I think you can trust as a veteran presence in any locker room, right? And last but not least, I read an article recently. Shout out to our guys over at Orlando Magic Daily. You always have to shout them out over on this podcast. And they mentioned that they believe that our biggest worry at the trade deadline is painfully obvious, and it's the guard depth. And I'm really interested by this because I don't believe that, if we're being honest, I don't think that the Orlando Magic's guard depth is nearly as much of a detriment as the article states. It states that in one offseason, the Orlando Magic give up KCP, Corey Joseph, Gary Harris, and Cole Anthony. Yes, you got rid of 4 point guards / shooting guards, and the only players retained from last season who played at least 20 minutes per game were Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs. Cool. But you still have Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, and you replace those other 4 guys with Desmond Bane, who is better than all 4 of those guys, Tyus Jones, who I think is better than Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, and Corey Joseph, and I think it's on par with KCP, if not a little bit better than KCP, given the fact that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was brought in to be a 3-and-D shooting guard for the Orlando Magic last season. He didn't shoot the three well, and he didn't guard well. I think Tyus Jones, for what he brings as a table setter and a three-point shooter, is going to translate much, much better than what KCP brought to the team last season. So I think Tyus Jones is better than all four of those guys. Jace Richardson, I think, can give you similar productivity to what Cole Anthony gave you as an off-the-bench scorer, and I think that he can be more serviceable as a shot creator than guys like Corey Joseph, Gary Harris. And obviously, we already know his three-point shooting acumen off the catch is 37%. That's what we signed KCP for last year. So you out goes 4, you bring in 3, all that fit the team really well and all are talent upgrades. And then you pair that with the fact that you get a healthy Jalen Suggs, you bring back Anthony Black, and if you want to, the wild card still as another guy who can be your 6th or 7th in the rotation is Jet Howard. And I would even make the argument that another guy you could throw in as potential guard depth is Noah Pinda. I think that Noah Pinda is slated as a guy that I go back to the Philadelphia 76ers days of Ben Simmons before recently he started getting labeled as a power forward. Back then, he was the Philadelphia 76ers starting point guard. And I think that if you're talking about as a starting point guard or as a, of course, in this case, a backup point guard, Noah Pinda is a better ball handler than all 4 guys that we let go this offseason. I believe that the only thing that he doesn't do better than any of them is shooting, because I think when we talk about operating as a transition threat, he's better. I think when you're talking about operating as an athletic finisher, he's better. I think if you're talking about being a guy who can make the second and third pass to open up the offense in the half court, I think he's better. I think as an overall facilitator, he's probably the best facilitator of that group, with Corey Joseph maybe being right behind him. Like, this backcourt, sure, you lost 4 guys, and you replace them with 3, maybe 4 to 5, who all are better and fit the scheme of what the Orlando Magic are trying to do a lot more. Everybody that I just named outside of Noah Pinda is a 37% or better three-point shooter. KCP wasn't bringing that, at least not last season. Cole Anthony wasn't bringing that. Gary Harris wasn't bringing that. Corey Joseph wasn't bringing that. One of the biggest things we were hurt by last season was our lack of three-point shooting. We threw out every point guard and shooting guard from last season that wasn't adding to that outside of Anthony Black, who's just too high level of a defender to just let go of or put on the trade block without getting significant draft capital back, right? And you replace them all with high-level shooters. You replace them all with guys who can be real on-ball threats. You replace them all with high-level passers. Didn't the Oklahoma City Thunder just win the championship off of having high-level three-point shooters to stretch the floor, an elite-level MVP candidate, an all-NBA caliber number 2, high-level top 5 defense, which the Orlando Magic are coming off of a year where they were the 3rd best scoring defense in the NBA. Like, the blueprint just got named out, just spelled out by the Oklahoma City Thunder this past season. And pretty much, the Orlando Magic are similarly following the blueprint. Can Paulo Banchero get to the free throw line as much as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Based off his rookie year, I think he's capable. But other than that, everything else that lines up outside of a high-level shot blocker like what the Oklahoma City Thunder have in Chet Holmgren, the Orlando Magic are trying to build towards that. And if we're talking more so about philosophy, the philosophy of the Oklahoma City Thunder that they've built over the last 3 to 4 seasons is guys who could dribble, pass, shoot, make good decisions, and shoot the ball at a high clip. Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, Jace Richardson, all dribble, pass, shoot, and make good decisions. Noah Pinda, high-level athlete that could dribble, pass, not shoot nearly as much, but a guy who can make real noise as a guy who can operate in the half court as a facilitator. And number 3, they're all players that are going to be floor raisers because, again, from a talent perspective, we upgraded. I think my comment section has been right for the last couple of months that the truth of the matter is that the front court depth is our real issue. I don't know if Jonathan Isaac is the long-term savior at backup power forward slash center as a shot blocker. I don't know if I trust Wendell Carter to be the center, the starting center for the Orlando Magic when we win a championship. Goga Batazde is likely to get paid a big bag by a different team 2 seasons from now when he's an unrestricted free agent. Going after guys like Nicholas Claxton and centers of that ilk, that might be our bigger foible, I think, not the guard depth. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys can let me know in the comment section down below, but I think you guys agree with me. I think a lot of the comments I've read in the past state that the front court is actually more of the bigger question mark in terms of just future moves. But I'm interested to see what you guys say in the comment section down below. But with that being said, this is another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast in the books. Again, my biggest question to you guys is, what do you believe our record will be in the 4 games of the NBA Cup, and how deep in the NBA Cup tournament do you think you guys predict the Orlando Magic could go if they make it into the tourney, which I think they have a really, really high chance of making it to, right? Also, my last question being related to the guard depth. I would like you guys to rank our point guard and shooting guard depth in order from most important guard to least important guard. And I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say related to that as well. But with that being said, again, this has been another episode of the Magic Latest Podcast. I'll be back with you guys again tomorrow for the updated news around the Magic squad. Until then, though,